Have you ever fished for bass in the springtime and thought to yourself, man, I could really use a slump buster right about now? I have. I'm not too proud to admit that. But luckily for me, I found one. This is the Paddletail Swimbait, and it is the very definition of a slump buster when it comes to fishing for bass in the pre-spawn. You want to learn more about it? Well then, let's get started. In 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Strike Zone. I'm Shane Lenz, and today we are going to be kicking off a brand new series on my channel, the Lure Showcase series. The goal of this series is to expand your horizons and increase your knowledge as an angler by learning about different lures commonly used throughout the wide world of fishing. As previously mentioned, today we're going to be taking a look at the Paddletail Swimbait, and we're going to be talking about the what, where, when, why, and how of fishing with a paddletail. We'll be applying our reasoning by taking a look at a couple real-world examples from a very brisk day out on the water that I had earlier this year. Make sure to stay tuned for the entire video if you want to learn how to make the most out of this simple little lure. Before we get going though, I do want to give a very special shout out to my friend Kaylee Wilson, who had some awesome Strike Zone apparel made for us. Anybody interested in supporting the channel and looking for a sweatshirt, comment down below and I will reach out to you. Now, with all that said, let's get out on the water.
There's the fish. First of the day. Feels solid. Nice bass. There we go. It's a good way to start the day. We just got out here about, I don't know, 5 minutes ago. He's digging down real nice. Nice bass to start the day. And I think that was on our first cast on the swim bait here. 3.5 inch swim bait. You had a nice start. 13 inches maybe probably about 13 inches, so can't be mad about that. Yesterday spent the day out at Pine Lake and caught about 15 9-inch bass, so we are already breaking records today. Thanks, guy.
When winter turns to spring, largemouth bass are going to migrate from their deeper wintering areas to the shallower waters where food is more plentiful. In most of these bodies of water, they're going to specifically target high-calorie meals like crayfish and baitfish, the latter of which is exactly what this is meant to imitate. Now, I may fish mostly in Wisconsin and the upper Midwest, but there's not a lake around that doesn't have some kind of shad, minnow, shiner, or something that this lure will not imitate perfectly. It also comes in a variety of colors and sizes, so match the hatch of whatever is on your body of water, and you're gonna catch fish.
There's one right there. Let's see what we got. Feels solid, nice bass. Another nice bass here. And that's the 3.5 inch swim bait. Again, fatty staying down. Let him run. Ran to the other side of the boat. This time of the year in the spring, they definitely have a lot of fight to them too. And the females will have a little extra weight because of those eggs. There we go. Yep. Another nice fat bass. Same, you can tell that's on that 3.5 inch swim bait again.
Part of the reason I'm such an advocate for using this lure in the springtime is because it catches bass of all sizes. It doesn't matter whether you're using a 3.5 inch, a 4.5 inch, whatever. It catches small bass in droves, which gives you that constant action that you're looking for, but it also gives you some pole benders that you can brag about.
2 pounds, 3 ounces. Not a bad fish. Thank you.
I wish I had the camera panned down just a little bit so that you could see the reel, but you can tell from this video how I'm retrieving this. Okay, I'm not bouncing it along the bottom. I'm not ripping it through the water. It's just a nice and steady retrieval. Now, can you catch fish using those other methods? Absolutely. Of course you can. But in my experience, this lure works the best when you're allowing the action to come from the paddle tail. Okay, it'll look just like an unsuspecting minnow swimming through the water, and trust me when I tell you, that is all the invitation a bass needs to come by and scoop it up.
See, just hooked on the top of that mouth. All right, fish number 6. Thanks, Bill. Yep, there's one. There's a bass. Yep, another one that feels a little nicer. That's for sure. And again, same kind of a thing. Felt it on the first one. He didn't want it that badly. Came back a second time for it though.
Part of the reason this bait works so well in the springtime is because it's early enough in the year where the vegetation hasn't totally choked out the shallower parts of the lake. Okay, this lure excels in shallow water, but as you can see, it has a big old hook sticking out of the top of it and absolutely no weed guard, meaning it is definitely not weedless. But if you can find some shallow vegetation that's early on in its development, then you got a good chance at hooking up with a bass.
And so far, all we've been doing for the day is just drifting a flat of 4, 5, 6 feet. Not much for depth change in this area. The vegetation is definitely starting to grow up. I was here 2 weeks ago and there was not much of it, a little bit. But it's definitely growing up now to the point of where it's everywhere. But not crowding, which is good. I did have a nice 3-pound, 3-ounce bass last time I was here though, so I'm looking to see if I can top that today. There's a fish. And this is exactly the kind of vegetation I've been finding them in all day long here. About 4 feet, 5 feet maybe at its deepest. I think they're just buried down in there just waiting for something to pass by. And today it has been a 3.5-inch swim bait that passes by time and time again.
So one of the questions I got in the comments section of my last video was, how can you tell the difference between male and female bass? And in the springtime, it is incredibly easy. The bigger, fatter bass are almost always female. And this fish right here is a prime example of that. Okay, that big belly of eggs that she's got. And to be clear, when I call them fatties, no, I don't believe it hurts their feelings. I believe that if fish had feelings, actually, they would wear that title as a badge of honor because it means that they are the toughest and smartest fish who have showcased their survival skills, and they're the ones that are most likely to pass on their genes to the next generation, which is the ultimate goal for anything in the animal kingdom.
And those are the most important ones. We want to see those guys get hooked, get in, and get right back into the water because we want more bass in these lakes, not less. We want to make sure those females are nice and healthy.
Next, I decided to test out my swim bait in a different kind of vegetation. From Eurasian milfoil to lily pads in the early stages of development, my success continued with 3 bass on the west shoreline. Then it was back to the east side of the lake for one last drift across the flats. That was a good idea. In my last drift across the vegetated flats, the paddletail continued to showcase its magic. And yeah, the bass weren't exactly monsters, but the action was constant. All in all, I think I totaled 25 fish in under 4 hours out on the water. But not before I had one last special treat.
There's a fish. There we go. Nice hit on that. Feels good. Oh, yeah. That's a nice bass. She's a fatty. Oh, she's a runner, too. Oh, yep. Here's a good bass. Oh, yeah. This is a nice bass. Oh, that is a fat mama. I don't even know if she's that long, but she just looks thick. Keeps diving down. Staying down. Yeah. Oh, that is a fat mama, we like to call those. Perfect hook set. Wow, that was quick. That is a fat bass, and we love to see it. 2.8, 2 pounds, 8 ounces. And she's all of it, let me tell you that. She's only about 16 inches, 16 and a half, but again, just thick.
So you've seen the success that the Paddletail Swimbait can bring. But let's recap our what, where, when, why, and how. The what? Paddletail Swimbait. Simple. 3.5 inch, 4.5 inch, blue, chartreuse, white. It really doesn't matter because they can all work. You just have to figure out which one works best for you. The where, in this case, shallow vegetated flats. Specifically where there's enough water overhead that you can run that swim bait over the top of the weeds. The when, really you can use this any time of the year, but I've always used it in the spring because that's where I've had the most success, specifically in the pre-spawn. The why, remember, coming out of winter, bass are targeting high-calorie bait fish that this lure is meant to imitate. The how, you can really retrieve this in a number of different ways. You can use a stop and go method, a twitch and pause method. You can jig it along hard bottom surfaces like rocks and sand. But for my money, I'm going to put faith in the design of the paddle tail, and I'm going to use a steady retrieve and trust that that paddle tail is going to create the action in the water that I need. We are forgetting one thing though. We've talked about the what, the where, the why, the when, and the how. But what about the who? The who is you. The more baits and lures that you can take the time to familiarize yourself with, the more comfortable you're going to be using them, and the more dangerous you're going to be as a fisherman. So I highly encourage you to get online, read some articles, pick up a magazine or a book if those still exist, or take some time to watch your favorite episode of The Strike Zone, my personal favorite option. Either way, just continue to learn more about fishing, because the more you know, the better you're going to be. I promise you. And thank you guys for tuning in to this very first episode of the Lure Showcase series. If you're interested in more content like this, please be sure to subscribe, because I promise you there is a lot more lures that I can showcase than just this one. As always, thank you guys for your support, and we'll see you next time.